What's up, guys? Well, not too long ago, I spent just over a week in Austin, Texas, attending this year's South by Southwest Festival. It was my first time attending. It's a massive festival, probably the biggest one in the United States that displays new films and TV shows, as well as musical artists and even some technology. But obviously, I pretty much spent the entire time checking out the film and TV section, and I was able to check out 23 films as well as the first 2 episodes of a TV series that I'm going to include in this ranking. So 24 brand new pieces of media I was able to check out at this festival, and we're going to rank them all from worst to best. Now, it needs to be said, not every single thing that I'm going to be talking about in this video has a current slated release date. A lot of things that you see on film festivals are actually looking for distribution, and this is the way that they get interest, they get buzz, and have distributors purchase them and then give them a wide release date or a streaming release date. So any movie or TV series that I talk about in this video that already has a date on the books, I'm going to let you guys know when you can check that out. But a majority of these films, we're just going to have to keep in the back of our minds, and I'll try to update you guys either on here or Twitter or somewhere else if I see a release date announced, especially for the ones that I'm really excited about. Now, if you're only interested in checking out the ranking of the different things that I saw, there will be a time code below, but I always like to start off these festival rankings by discussing my experience at the festival. And being that this was my first time attending South by Southwest, I had a lot of expectations, and I actually shelled out a good amount of money specifically to get this platinum badge. So they have different tiers. Obviously, I was approved for press, so I had the equivalent of like their base level badge for free, but I upgraded to this badge for about $650, which would guarantee me 2 days early access to select all the films that I wanted to check out. And I don't completely know if that was worth the investment or not. I'm kind of on the fence, because while the first couple of days of the festival, this thing came in clutch and absolutely removed all of the stress that we typically have at Fantastic Fest, where you log in at 9 a.m. and everybody's mad dashing trying to get tickets, and it's just an absolute bloodbath and starts your day off with a lot of disappointment and stress. The first couple of days, this alleviated that. After day 3, it was very similar to what I experience every single year at Fantastic Fest, where you log in at 9 a.m., the app starts to get a little slow, you maybe get 1 or 2 things that you want, and then everything else gets sold out. Even with the Premier Platinum badge, the upsell one. So, would I have had a worse experience without this badge? I'm sure that I would have. I was still able to see every single film that I wanted to check out, so I can't be too unhappy with it. Is it worth a $650 upgrade? I don't know. But that aside, I had a lot of fun at the festival. Now, what was interesting about South by Southwest is that it's not centrally located at one theater like Fantastic Fest is, or even just at 2 theaters like Overlook Film Festival is. It's spread out all across downtown Austin. You have a lot of the big premieres at the Paramount Theater. You have a number of them playing over at the South Lamar location of Alamo Drafthouse. You have some of them playing over at the Hyatt. You have some of them playing at the Violet Crown. So depending on how you work your schedule out, there's a lot of commuting back and forth, most of which I just walked or briskly jogged between movies, but there's a lot of times where you're pretty much required to have an Uber, and cross your fingers that you're able to get one in time to meet your movie premiere. So it was a little more stressful, but also was kind of fun in a lot of ways. I really enjoyed walking around downtown Austin between movies and checking out the scenery. I did a number of short reactions right by the water that you guys saw about a week ago. I ate at a number of places, like a couple of different pizza places. I ate at a barbecue joint. I ate at a taco joint. And so, you know, somebody who loves food and loves to travel and experience foods that aren't regional to my area, that was a lot of fun. So I really actually enjoyed walking between theaters and having to stay mobile all throughout the festival. It just kind of made things be a little more exciting, you know, change things up a little bit more versus just walking into a movie and then walking back outside the same theater back and forth all day for a week. And it was also a very entertaining time because I was actually rooming with a whole group of horror TikTokers that I've become friends with. And so that's just a very interesting world as a YouTube guy, being a fly on the wall for all the conversations regarding TikTok content creation and brand deals and how that world works. So personalities aside, which there was no shortage of wild personalities in this group.
Sean Chandler, Cody Leach. Nope, Sean's right here.
It was a very interesting experience, just kind of being a totally different entity, hanging out with these guys and figuring out how similar and how extremely different our work worlds are. And unfortunately, a number of them have caught that festival flu, that convention crud that a lot of us get after you were surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people and going in airports and everything like that. So I'm going to try to put some video clips of my friends that I stayed with throughout this video on the movies that it pertains to, but a lot of them are under the weather, so I don't know how many I'm going to get. But if you check them out, if you enjoy their personality, I'll put their social media links down in the video description below. And if you do follow them, be sure to leave a comment saying Cody Leach sent me.
I got to meet Michael freaking Bay, and there might have been an explosion in the background when we shook each other's hand. I also got to meet McLovin, and I showed him I was Jonah Hill for like 5 years during Halloween because everybody thought I looked like Jonah Hill for the longest time. Maybe I still do.
My favorite memory of the festival really wasn't even at the festival itself. It was when we were all back at the Airbnb. We were in our comfy cozies and we whipped out the Blockbuster game. And let me tell you, playing Blockbuster with a bunch of movie-loving people is on another level. We got heated. We got crazy. It was a blast.
Doctor sleep.
Fuck yeah! That's right. That's correct.
That's House Rules. Poltergeist 3.
Hey, wait a minute. No. Oh, why are not supposed to be
The
up there?
Innkeepers.
Vacancy.
And
Yes, good pull.
My Bloody Valentine 3D.
Psycho.
Oh my god.
Oh.
he's so fucking loud.
He's so locked in.
He's locked in.
There she goes again.
Easy dub.
Wow.
And one more thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the movies is I was able to go through a number of the setup experiences. They had one for Alien Earth. They had one that was themed from Paramount Plus shows like Dexter New Blood and Survivor and Yellow Jackets. And the Alien one was kind of cool. The Paramount Plus Lodge thing I thought was incredibly lame. It was basically just a table set up to take a picture. The Survivor thing were like some replicas of a couple of notes that they would find buried in the sand. The Yellow Jackets thing was literally just some trees and some foliage and a paper cutout of the little queen. So I was very disappointed with that, but something else that was cool, I was able to attend a number of these conferences, these little presentations. There was a number of actors, directors, and so me, Gigi, and Chuck were actually able to check out the Last of Us 2 panel, and we got press approved to go into the pit area and take really good close pictures for the first 4 minutes. Got to watch the brand new trailer debuted before anybody else. Gigi got a great shot of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey embracing after the trailer was done. It was pretty emotional for all of us fans. I also checked out one that was Hideo Kojima, where he was premiering a lot of things about Death Stranding 2. Not necessarily a game I was really interested in, but I love Hideo's work like Metal Gear Solid. And so Norman Reedus was there. Troy Baker came out, who's one of the bigger prolific voice actors. A lot of people involved with the game and the score of it and everything. So that was a really interesting thing to check out. And the last one I saw was actually music related, where Lars Ulrich came out from Metallica. He's the drummer, and he was talking with one of the higher ups in technology at Apple. And they were having a discussion about all the technological advancements and things that Metallica has used throughout their career to kind of push the envelope. And most recently, the one that they were obviously there to promote the most is this new Vision Pro concert that you can check out that I think is already available if you have an Apple Vision Pro. So some of those were pretty cool to check out, just to kind of break up watching nothing but movies the entire time. South by Southwest is a massive festival that covers a lot of different things. Now, with all that said, let's get into the ranking. Now, something that's always difficult when you go to these film festivals is that oftentimes you're watching very independently made films from very passionate filmmakers and a very passionate cast, and you get to know their personalities a little bit in the pre and post Q&A of these screenings of these films. So more times than not, even the films that I don't enjoy, I almost feel bad for not enjoying them, because you really get to see filmmakers' passion much more than you do with the separation we often have with big budget studio filmmaking. But something has to be the bottom of this list. And for me, easily my number 24 is a film called Ash that's actually releasing wide today, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a film directed by Flying Lotus, who is a well-known music artist. I personally don't know his music, but that's just not a genre of music that I typically listen to. And this is a film that stars Isa Gonzalez as well as Aaron Paul. Aaron Paul obviously being the draw for me. And it's a sci-fi horror film. And what I will say on the positive is that I did like the look of this film. It's got a very neon baked in shadows look, if that makes any sense. There's a lot of deep reds and blues and everything is painted in darkness. And I thought it was a really cool aesthetic, especially when you hear the direct influences that Flying Lotus was drawing from with the look and the feel of the movie. This was apparently Aiza's first time as a leading actress, first time being first on the call sheet. And I think that she has a lot of promise, a lot of potential. I hope to see her in more things. And of course, you guys know I'm a Breaking Bad whore. So anything that Aaron Paul does, I'm at least going to have some interest in, and he delivered what I expected Aaron Paul to deliver, which is a good thing.
How fucked up was that? Oh my God.
There was also a really cool creature design in the climax of this film that I thought was pretty badass looking, mostly because it is very reminiscent of The Thing, which some of you guys know is my favorite horror film of all time. So as soon as we got a monster that was very much like, oh, that's pretty much The Thing right there, I really dug that. Unfortunately, everything else about this film just really did not work for me. I felt like the story was about as thin as tissue paper. I felt like the editing was really incoherent and jarring, and it borderline gave me a headache. The way that the action or the tension sequences are shot and edited together is very choppy, very quick cut, a lot of shaky cam, and even more amplified the fact that I was sitting so far in the front in the Paramount Theater that it actually made me a little bit nauseous, which maybe 3 films in my entire life has actually done. So even the more exciting pieces of the film, I really couldn't enjoy. That just bugged my eyes watching them. And the main issue here, which is only amplified after you hear the Q&A and you hear about a lot of the direct references and a lot of the direct influence that Flying Lotus took to make this film, is that I think he wears the influences way too much on his sleeve. This really crosses over the territory of being influenced by something into the territory of kind of ripping that thing off. This movie is literally like you take Alien, The Thing, and Event Horizon, throw it in a blender, and then you put the aesthetic of Dead Space and Mass Effect on it, and that is the film. And those are all things that I love, so on paper you would think this would be awesome, but there's just nothing here that really stands out or does something unique or interesting with those influences. It just really draws on them and makes you remember those things that are all significantly better than I thought Ash was. Essentially, the story here, you got Eiza Gonzalez that wakes up, she's part of this space crew that's on this planet, and all of the people in her crew are dead. And so she's trying to figure out what exactly happened, what got into the ship, or what got into their environment that killed all of them. And so it's just essentially this slow burn mystery of her trying to figure things out. And she eventually links up with Aaron Paul, who's the only person alive who might have some answers. And I just felt like the answers that we were eventually given were so obvious that 5 minutes into the film, I pretty much knew exactly where things were going to go. And it just takes a long time to really get there. So I wish I could have loved this, because hearing Flying Lotus talk about it, hearing the cast talk about it, they were all so passionate about it. They were all so excited, really jazzed up, especially Flying Lotus, about video game fans seeing this and checking out all of the different aesthetics he put in here to remind us of things like Dead Space and Mass Effect. But I can't lie, I just did not enjoy the film at all. So it sucks, but this was the movie I enjoyed the least at the festival. But one thing I'll say to kind of push this to ending in a little bit more of a positive note is that Aaron Paul is one of the very few celebs that I've ever seen at a festival, especially South by Southwest, that actually stopped after the Q&A and spent God knows how long at the edge of the stage greeting and talking with and taking pictures with his fans. And that is something that just endears me and makes me love that guy even more than I already loved his work. Because so many times you watch these Q&As, and I understand it. I never hold it against them, especially the big A-list celebrities. They don't want to be stuck there. They don't want to be potentially put in harm's way. So after the Q&A, they just go right outside backstage, and I assume get right into their limo and go back to their hotel. But 2 people, one of which I'll talk about a little bit later, immediately after their Q&A ended, just walked to the edge of the stage, got down on one knee or sat down like Aaron Paul did, and just sat there with a group of people one by one, chatting with people, taking pictures. And I just loved that so much. Like, even though I didn't like the film, and I hate that I didn't like it, that ended things on such a positive note for me that it was all worth it in the end. And so it was pretty funny. So first of all, the first woman that came out to talk to him had him sign a coffee cup, and I didn't overhear the whole conversation, but I could gather it was something along the lines of her actually being diagnosed with some illness. I assume cancer, being that that's the Breaking Bad tie. and she's in remission. She's good now. And so he was talking with her, very heartfelt for a couple of minutes. That was awesome to see. But the person in front of me, Aaron Paul looked at him and he goes, "Hey, Matt." I think his name was Matt. He's like, "Matt?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Bro, like, what's up? Like, you're seriously going to act like you don't remember how we met each other?" And the dude looked so puzzled. And he's like, "I'm fucking with you, dude. I see your name on your name tag." And so we got a good laugh out of that. So he takes the picture with the guy and he moves out of the way. And I was like, "Now do me." So he looks at my name tag. He goes, "Cody." And I'm like, "Aaron, what's up?" So that was a really funny moment for me. But snapped a quick picture with him. Unfortunately, the fucking Paramount Theater turned the lights out, which they had never done before. So the picture got slightly blurred in the corner, but I cropped it where it's pretty good. But got a picture with Aaron Paul, told him a huge fan, loved Breaking Bad, and he seemed really appreciative. I didn't want to take up too much of his time because there was 45 other people behind me, but that was awesome. Getting to meet Aaron Paul and seeing that he's one of those types of celebs that just still genuinely cares about his fans and never forgets that. That is awesome. Coming in at number 23 is a film called Touch Me. And this is essentially like a horror, quirky comedy where you have a woman that is fixated on this man that she used to have this sexual relationship with that is an alien. And his touch, he's got like a tentacle thing. His touch is so intoxicating and so euphoric that sexual experiences with him are like an addiction for anybody who's with him. So the story is essentially this girl going back into this toxic relationship she has with this alien and bringing her gay best friend along. And it turns into like this weird little love triangle threesome type thing. I thought there was a lot of potential here for some really out there physical comedy, especially when they market the film basically on the term tentacle sex. But I feel like the joke ran thin within the first act of the film. And it's basically just that joke over and over and over again for 90 minutes. The film is highly influenced visually and stylistically by Japanese films and kung fu films. And that's just a side of cinema that I'm really not that experienced with and not that interested in. So I couldn't even really appreciate that. It's just a movie that didn't do a whole lot for me. Whatever they were trying to convey, whatever they were trying to draw out of you from an audience member, I feel like they drew everything they were going to draw out of me in the first 15 minutes. And everything after that, I'm just like, okay, you got anything else? Because you're just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. Coming in at number 22 is a film called Slanted that, it's probably going to be a minefield to discuss, but fuck it. Here we go.
I'm in danger.
And Slanted is kind of like a coming-of-age teen comedy with a bit of drama and like a sprinkling of horror on top of it. And it's essentially telling the story of this Asian girl who comes from a family of immigrants, and her life dream, her obsession, is to win prom queen at her high school. And so at some point in the film, she goes to have this experimental procedure done to turn her into a Caucasian girl so that she can win prom queen. Now you hear that premise and you understand immediately why a lot of people, a number of people that were with me, hear that and go, oh God, I'm not going anywhere near that with a 10-foot pole because no matter what I say, I'm going to get a bunch of shit for it. And my knee-jerk reaction was that exact same thing. But then the rebellious side of me was like, well, why the fuck can't I talk about it? Like, my opinion's just as valid as everybody else, so fuck it. I'm going to go watch this. I'm going to see what it's about, and I'm going to tell you what the hell I think about it. And when I walked into this movie, I was really optimistic because there's been a number of movies that on paper, the premise sounds like, oh my God, this is going to be a lightning rod for all of the horrible discussion, the worst forms of discussion of film online. And then it ends up being actually very profound, very clever, very entertaining. And so my hope was that this movie was going to be that version of this story. My fear was that it was going to be what everybody feared it was going to be, which is a movie that is just very on the nose, very heavy-handed, very much message first, and ends up being a very offensive experience. And ultimately, the movie really wasn't either of those things, which was kind of more disappointing than it actually being offensive to me. I think that the first half of the film or so, but when she's actually an Asian girl, I was on board for it. I thought that it was entertaining. I thought that it was mostly enjoyable. I think that they were doing a pretty good job at setting up some of the themes of the movie and setting up some of the commentary. And I'm like, okay, I'm on board. we'll see where this is going. So far, we're doing pretty decent. And once you get to about the halfway point or so of the movie, as soon as the shift happens where you go from the main Asian girl into the white version of her, who is played by McKenna Grace, it just felt like all of the dramatic side of things that I was actually pretty invested in and I thought was working really well kind of just disappears. And then it just kind of turns into your typical teen coming of age movie where, you know, the almost like the nerdy girl gets popular. It follows all of those same cliches where she starts to mistreat her friends who are actually her friends, and she's putting all her stock into all the popular girls that couldn't give a fuck about her. And every once in a while they try to drop some kind of a commentary, but in the back half I felt like it lost any kind of wit, any kind of sharpness, and it just kind of becomes more low-hanging fruit. And never at a point where it really offended me. Never at a point where I felt like, oh my God, when people see this is going to be the scene that just sets the internet on fire. It never had anything anywhere close to being that interesting. And so really it just ends up being a movie that's very bland and vanilla, which is ultimately one of the main things that they're kind of commenting on as far as the difference of cultures here. So nonetheless, Slanted, a movie that I feared could be the lightning rod of this list. And really it just ended up being kind of a bland coming of age thing with a premise that's certainly going to raise some eyebrows. Number 21 is a film called The Surfer that stars Nicolas Cage and Julian McMahon. As much as I love The Cage, Julian McMahon, who I grew up knowing as Christian Troy, him being in a film as a villain actually excited me even more than Nick Cage. But this is a bizarre movie, to put it lightly, which, you know, I guess you kind of expect from Nicolas Cage at this point. That's pretty much all he does, these really off-the-wall indie movies, and God bless him for it. But The Surfer is basically about this guy who has moved back to Australia, and he's trying to just enjoy a day at the beach that he used to enjoy as a kid in his childhood, and these group of territorial surfers won't let him or his son enjoy the beach. And so it essentially is a movie where he is stuck in the parking lot at this beach trying to get away to get onto the beach while this group of surfers are systematically just dismantling his life. And for the first 2/3 of the film, it's an odd experience, but I felt like I knew where it was heading. It was like, okay, I see what you're kind of commenting on here. I see what the allegory is. Interesting, little subversive, cool. And then where it eventually goes, I was like, oh, no, totally fucking wrong. I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, are we commenting on toxic masculinity? Are we commenting on, you know, appropriating cultures? Are we commenting on just what, surf culture? Like, I really don't understand. Like, maybe this is a movie that's above my head, or maybe just the message is a little convoluted and messy, but it just ended up being a film that when the credits rolled, I just kind of sat there and scratched my head going, man, what else played in this time slot that I could have watched? So I really didn't enjoy this one, but there was a number of people that I saw it with that really dug it and thought that it was one of the better films of the festival. So depending on your taste, maybe check it out. But Nicolas Cage is good. Julian McMahon was good. They were the two that I showed up for, so at least I was satisfied with that. I just think the story and the message and everything they're going for was just very bizarre and strange, and so it ends up being a film that just puzzled and confused me. But it is supposed to be coming to, I believe, theaters, if not going to streaming services on May 2nd. So keep an eye out for it. Coming in at number 20 is a movie called The Astronaut. And this was actually the first film that I saw at the entire festival at the Zach Theater, which is a really nice theater, but this was the only movie that I saw premiere there, which is a shame because it was pretty comfortable and a really nice setup. And the coolest part about this, kind of, was that this was the only movie that I actually got approved to do the red carpet for. I applied for every single one of the major movies that I was interested in, got denied or put on the wait list for all of them because it was just very competitive, and I imagine all the major trades took up all of the slots. But nonetheless, I got approved for this, and I got really excited. Me and my buddy Chuck, the movie guy, linked up, and we were both going to go do this to tag team it together because we're massive Lawrence Fishburne fans. And he was supposed to be there, and I wore my Dream Warriors shirt. I had questions planned pertaining to this new movie, as well as wanting to get some kind of a thing from him about Dream Warriors or Rudderless or Boys in the Hood, these movies that I adore, and got myself all pumped up. And the first wrench in the system was after I got there, you know, when you do the red carpet on these premieres, they have basically these little signs with your name on the red carpet. And these fucking assholes had these ginormous tripods with these massive fucking camcorders that look like they're from 1994. And they were just all over my name. So if I was eventually going to go up to the red carpet, I would have had to like squeeze between these greedy bitches to try to get even just a second of breath. So that was roadblock number 1. Roadblock number 2 was after they handed you the face sheet, which shows you the face and the name of everybody on the red carpet, because a lot of times people that are doing red carpets don't know these actors. They don't know the film. They're just there because they're commissioned to by whatever trade they work for. And the one name that was missing was Mr. Lawrence Fishburne. And so suddenly I found myself ultimately defeated that, damn, I was excited I actually got access to this one, and the one person that I was really excited to talk about is not even here. Third roadblock is that all of the talent, Gabriel Luna, the director, the producer, the writer, and then even more so Kate Mara, who is the lead here, showed up between 45 minutes and an hour late. And so I was sitting there going, okay, if we stay here, we're not going to get a seat that's worth the fuck. So let's just leave. I just pretty much gave up. So not the best note to start the festival on, but nonetheless, I was like, okay, whatever. I'm not going to let it get me down. I think the movie is going to be good. And the movie was fine. It's about Kate Mara, who is an astronaut who crash lands back on Earth, where she was investigating some extraterrestrial planet. And so she's basically put into this high-tech house, this little safe house, so that she can be studied, she can be medically tested, and she can also like do some rehab. And they basically figure out that something has followed her back, like something has come back with her and is stalking this house. Really cool premise. Kate Mara is a great actress. Lawrence Fishburne's not in it much, but he's good for what he's here for. Gabriel Luna, again, he's her husband, not in it very much, but a little more soft-spoken, but I think that's the way he was directed, because that's very much not the type of roles I see from him. But where things eventually go in the back half, more specifically the third act of the film, I just thought was incredibly silly. So it was an intriguing premise that had some decent tension, but the way that things played out really fell on its face for me, really kind of tainted my enjoyment of the rest of the film. And the sound design of the movie, more specifically with the score, was so loud and overbearing that it was almost like the filmmaker shouting at you, "You're supposed to be tense right now, just so you know." And it just felt too much. So The Astronaut was okay. It doesn't have distribution now, so I don't have a release date to tell you. But if you're a Kate Mara fan, if the premise interests you, maybe check it out. There was a number of people that did like it. I just felt like the way that things played out, not the way I would have enjoyed seeing them go. And something important to note here, probably the next 8 or 9 entries are basically all close to being even for me. Like, there's a whole big middle section of this list that are all movies that do some things really well, do some things that kind of miss the mark for me, but they're movies that overall I didn't have a bad time with. They didn't really rise to the ranks of being something I'm super excited to recommend to everybody, but all movies that I think are going to work better for some than others. So definitely check out any of these movies from here on up. It's really only the bottom 4 that I just did not work for me at all. Number 19, we have a film called Descendant, and this was actually kind of a last-minute decision. I had tickets to go see a film called Dead Lover that seemed kind of interesting, but all of the other people that I was with all got tickets to go see Descendant, so I fell victim to peer pressure and went and saw Descendant with them. And essentially, this is one of like 75 movies apparently that played at this year's South by Southwest that deals with alien invasion and that whole thing, that whole subgenre. And so it's a story about this guy, played by, the actor's name is Ross. You'll recognize him from Walking Dead. And he basically gets abducted and then comes back down. And ever since his abduction, he starts to lose his mind. He starts drawing things. He starts having these visions. His life starts to dismantle around him. And so it's a really kind of slow burn sci-fi type drama that is really dealing with like generational trauma, like, you know, having the sins of the father passed down onto the son. I think they did a decent job at merging those two ideas, alien invasion and generational trauma, but it's just a very slow-paced movie that I feel like doesn't do enough to sustain your interest for the entire runtime. And by the time the movie comes to its climax, I actually was a bit more positive on it because of the way that they decided to end it. I was like, okay, well, you know what? You landed the plane. Like, I think you did a pretty good job at satisfying your surface level story and satisfying the metaphor and the allegory and everything and the commentary you're going for. So good on you. Credit where credit is due. You won me back a little bit more at the end there. And then they give this final shot of the movie before the credits roll that completely ruined that. To me, it made no sense. It was like, okay, now everything is copacetic, now everything fits together, and then they give you one final shot that just throws the whole fucking thing out of whack. And now you're like, okay, that makes no sense. Now I don't understand anything about what you're trying to say. And so, unfortunately, this movie probably would have been a couple of spots higher, and then that final shot dropped it where it is right here. So it does not have an acquisition, or no, actually it was acquired, but it doesn't have a release date yet. So I would assume that this is going to be coming to a streaming service. This does not seem like a movie that's going to play in theaters very well. So if you like alien invasion movies, if you like more dramatic takes on that, maybe check it out. But yeah, when you do, explain to me what the fuck that final shot means, because to me, it was just like, no, cut that. Cut it now. Coming in at number 18 is a film called The Home, which I believe was a Swedish film. I think it was the only foreign film that I managed to see at South by Southwest. But this is a psychological horror film where you have this guy whose father has passed away and his mother's going through some type of dementia, and so he puts her into this nursing home, and while she is there, it's very clear that seemingly something is taking her over. And so he's basically trying to deal with everything involved with like his past trauma with his parents, while also trying to figure out if, how, what exactly is consuming his mother that is making her say and do these very evil, nefarious things. And it had some really solid scares in it. There was 2 or 3 moments that was genuinely unnerving. I think the performances were good, but this was so goddamn slow. And it just takes way too long to say what it needs to say. It takes way too long to get to the point. And when you get to the climax of the film, like, it really kind of gives you this uneasy feeling that some very bad things are about to happen. Like, it directly visually hints that some things are going to happen in numerous spots in the last stretch of the film, and none of it does. So, like, I don't even know if I would say that if it went through with it, if the film would fare better for me, but for a movie that I feel like I was just sitting there waiting for something to happen, and when it felt like something was actually going to, nothing did, it just kind of compounded how ultimately bored I was with the movie. So, well made, but not something that I would recommend to a lot of people, and certainly not anything that I would ever rewatch. And oddly enough, when I was looking to see if this was acquired, there is a U.S. film coming out at some point this year or next year with the same title, The Home, with a very similar premise about a son putting his mother into a nursing home and some very nefarious things start to happen, that stars Pete Davidson. But nowhere in the article did it link saying that this is like an American remake of The Home or anything like that. So maybe this is like a Dante's Peak Volcano situation. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe see the U.S. one. Maybe it'll be more entertaining. You know, with Pete Davidson in it, it's got to be somewhat more interesting, right? Right? Number 17 is a movie called Holland that stars Nicole Kidman, and it's like a psychological thriller where you have this housewife that lives in Holland, Michigan, which is a city in Michigan that I guess is completely themed off of that region to the Netherlands, and she starts to suspect that her husband might be having an affair. So her, as well as this guy that she really has a romantic feeling for at work, start to investigate her husband, and they start to find some things out. That's the basic premise of the movie. And this one, I don't know, it has some interesting visuals to it because of the whole Holland theme. So having this American city that has this very Holland style pride, and there's festivals and parades. And what was interesting about this movie is that it is somewhat modern. It's in like the 2000s. So I think they had like dial-up internet and everything. It is a certain region in modern-ish time, but it has a very like 50s aesthetic to it because of just the nature of this town and the nature of the Nicole Kidman character. Like, she's very much like the old school stereotype of a housewife where she just cooks and cleans and makes little meatloaf and just kind of sits around and waits for hubby to come home, as well as just the visual aesthetic of this city in Michigan, this town in Michigan, that is very colorful, very vibrant. So that's what I appreciated about the film. The story itself left a lot to be desired for me. Funny story, this is actually the only movie the entire festival that I was denied access to because I had watched something that was a big premiere at the Paramount Theater right before it. And so what the game you have to play if you don't have a Fast Pass, which I was not able to secure for this slot, which was the first time I started to be very disappointed with what I paid for with the Platinum Badge. I basically had to exit that movie and then haul ass and get into just the regular badge line, trying to gain access to Holland's premiere, which is quite literally first come, first serve. It's like a 1,200 capacity theater, but when they hit 1,200, everybody else that was waiting in line, no matter how long you were there, just gets sent away. And apparently I was 1,201 because I got all the way up to the fucking door after waiting for almost 2 hours, and they said, sorry, we're at capacity. And I'm like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. And so I just hung out for a while, went to go see another premiere after Holland got out. And everybody that managed to get into Holland was saying how the film is very slow, but it pays off big in the third act. Once the things are revealed and once you see what kind of movie you're watching, ooh, it really takes off. And so I was so intrigued by that reception that I was able to secure a ticket to the secondary screening the very next morning at 11 a.m., which is not a good time to watch a movie as slow and deliberately paced as this, I will admit. So maybe I would have had a little bit better experience with it watching it at home or something. But I was very patient with the film's pacing, knowing that according to everybody else, when you get to the third act, it pays off big. And I could not disagree more. I think the way that it pays off and the direction it decides to go was so cliche and so reminiscent of like 7, 9, 10 other movies that I have seen before that I was so disappointed. And so does it have an interesting direction in general? Maybe, I guess, sure. It's not nearly the most interesting thing that Nicole Kidman has done recently. This is not going to get like the accolades that strangely Baby Girl got, another movie I didn't quite get, but nonetheless, I thought it was okay. This is coming out to Prime Video on March 27th. I think it's perfectly fine as a watch at home Prime Video experience. Maybe some people who haven't seen as many movies as me will get a little bit more pizzazz out of the third act. For me, I was just like, oh my God, really? Like, this is where we're doing? I've seen this movie before and I've seen it better. Coming in at number 16 is a film called Sweetness. And I actually watched this one at home, not at the actual festival. Another very funny story. So I was not able to secure a fast pass for this film as well as another film that played after it that day. And so I was kind of put in a situation where I had to choose one over the other. And so I decided to go with a film that we have yet to talk about. That's actually, the next one on the list that I had heard from a number of people was a much better film. And so I had reached out to the PR company in charge of this film and was trying to secure a ticket. And they said, hey, we can definitely get you a ticket. You'll have to pick it up over at the Hyatt Regency. And I said, great, I'm going to be there the very next morning checking out We Bury the Dead. So right before we see that film, I'll walk over to the valet station that you're telling me is holding my ticket. I'll get the ticket there. Man, this worked out great, didn't it? Fast forward to the next morning, and I walk up to the valet station at 10 o'clock in the morning on the Hyatt Regency in Austin, Texas. And I say, hey, I'm supposed to link up with Chris. Chris is holding my ticket according to this email here. And he goes, okay, yeah, Chris is over there. So Chris walks over, and he's this older black guy. Looked like he was probably in his late 40s. And immediately he starts messing with me, and I'm kind of along for the joke, even though I'm tired. And he's like, hey, yeah, it's going to be a $20 holding fee for your ticket. And I'm just laughing along with him, like, oh, this guy's just, giving me a little bit of a ribbing this morning. That's cool, whatever. I'm digging that. And he's like, yeah, so here's the deal. And his tone changed immediately as we're walking to wherever he's holding this ticket. He says, we're not even supposed to be helping out these South by Southwest people. And I had to stay late last night because none of you came out to pick up the ticket the time that you were supposed to. And now you're going to show up now. So, and then he opens up the door to this little closet that is holding the ticket. And he turns to me and he says, so $20 holding fee. And I'm standing there puzzled. It's just way too early for me to process this. But I was like, so you're not joking? Like, you're for real? And he's like, $20 holding fee. And I said, I just laughed in his fucking face and walked away. If it was a little later in the day, I would have told him to go fuck himself. But I was just like, way too early for any confrontation today. So I laughed in his face, walked away, and he started shouting at me. He's like, you better call her if you want to get your ticket. I said, I'm not worried about it, buddy. I'll still see the movie. And so I was not able to see Sweetness at the actual festival because of an asshole named Chris that works at the valet station at the Hyatt Regency in Austin. So if you're watching this, Chris, that's for you. Anyway, was able to get a screener because they were apologetic of this situation after I told them that. And so I watched it at home a couple days after I got home from the festival. But I'm including it on this list because it played there. Sweetness is a movie about this teenage girl who has this infatuation with this pop star. And through a series of circumstances, she is able to actually link up with him in real life and come to find out he's an absolute junkie. And so it kind of turns into like a modern play on Misery, where she handcuffs him in her house and holds him hostage to force him to detox, to try to, like, through her extreme fandom and admiration for him, is trying to do something to make him a better person. So very much like the Kathy Bates, James Caan kind of relationship, just not quite as psychotic. And things go very bad. We'll just say that. And I thought this movie was interesting. You know, it didn't hit as hard as I wish it would have. It felt like there was an opportunity for it to go hard in a couple of moments, and they kind of went for more of a half measure. But what the film ultimately ends up representing, what the note that they end on, what the ultimate journey of all this leads to, I think was satisfying enough. And so I had a decent enough time with it. I think I had a better time with it watching it at home than I would have watching it in the middle of a film festival after I've already been watching films for days and days and days. So it probably fared better for this that I had my little run-in with Chris. But nonetheless, Sweetness doesn't have a distribution yet that I could find, but if you're into that type of premise, like a modern day Misery, check it out because it was pretty decent. Coming in at number 15 for me is going to be a film called Hallow Road, and this is the one that I actually chose to see instead of standing in line for Sweetness, mostly because it had a good amount of hype built up for it by then, just with people that I had heard that had seen it, as well as a couple of the people in my friend group that I was with, Sydney, as well as Justin. Both really loved this film. I think at the time that they saw it, they said that's probably their number one of the festival. So this was one that a lot of us were really, really anticipating, and we're trying to go, through hell or high water, we're going to see this fucking movie. And it's one of those films that I think was the most frustrating for me because there's so many things about it that I loved. There's a really interesting approach here to the storytelling where the basic premise of the film is that you have Rosamund Pike and Matthew Rhys, who are a husband and wife, and they get a call really late in the night from their daughter saying that she's been in a car accident and the person that she hit is seriously injured, maybe dead. And so they have to get into a car and haul ass almost an hour to where their daughter is. And that's the journey of the movie almost in real time, is that you're spending most of the entire film in the car with Rosamund Pike and Matthew Rhys as they are having tension with each other, as well as continuously getting these phone calls from their daughter where she is continuously more distressed. The tension is rising. There's other people that start to get involved on the other side of the phone. And so what I loved about this movie is, some of those films that are just like this really contained setting can get a little bit dry and get a little bit stale. And I felt like this one always kept my interest by rising the tension and introducing little different elements here. Like, this is very much a thriller. And then by the 2/3 mark or so of the film, it starts to kind of throw in some supernatural type elements that actually pushes us more into the realm of horror. So it really kind of shifts genres a little bit that really kept my interest going. But what I loved about it is that you have this exploration of your gut reaction as a parent, where you put yourself in the shoes of these characters and you say, okay, if my kid was in this situation, what would win out? Would it be my moral understanding of the situation, or would it be my love for my kid and my obligation as a parent to do whatever I can to protect them and shield them and jump on the grenade for them? And this kind of explores that, where they know what they should do, one parent being much more on that side than the other, but they're both so conflicted about, but we need to save our daughter. We need to try to get there, see if there's anything we can do to help this situation beyond how fucked it sounds right now. And that was so engaging to me. But the way that they decided to end this film almost killed the movie for me. Now, when I say almost, this is a film that I absolutely want to watch again. And despite the fact that I walked away very frustrated with the last 5 minutes or so, the note that it decided to end on, this was by far the most interesting film of the festival to discuss with everybody else, because not only did we have like a wide varying degree of reception, we had 2 people that loved it. We had a couple people that were kind of like with me. I think Sean was pretty similar, where it's like, man, I liked a lot of that, but then they lost me at a certain point. We had one of us that really did not like it at all. But all of us having our different interpretations for certain things and what this scene meant and what this meant and what was real, what was not, was the most fascinating commentary conversation that we had outside of the theater the entire festival. Now, the problem is, as much conversation as we had, nobody's interpretation or explanation really helped my enjoyment of the last 5 minutes or so. And if I understand exactly what they were going for this movie, I feel like there was other ways to end that, make that point, but be more satisfying with it. It's a movie that has a literal interpretation. It's a movie that has more of a metaphoric interpretation, and they kind of only try to satisfy one of those, which is always frustrating for me. But it's a very interesting movie that I wish, if they had just landed the plane, this would have been, I mean, probably 5-6 spaces higher easily. I mean, it was that good up until the end for me. So one that I'm going to be fascinated to talk with people about regardless whenever it does finally get distribution.
My favorite movie from South by Southwest was this movie called Hallow Road, starring Rosamund Pike, who puts on an Oscar-worthy performance. And it's about these 2 parents who get this call from their daughter in the middle of the night telling them that she hit somebody in the middle of the road. And 90% of the movie is done in the car as the parents are on the way to their daughter while they're on the phone with her the whole time. And there is a very clear moment in this movie where it goes from being a thriller to a straight up horror movie. And it is so existential and thought-provoking, and it's incredibly ambiguous. So it's one of those that will leave you with questions and you can talk about for literally hours. It was incredible.
Coming in at number 14 is a film called On Swift Horses, and this is going to be coming out in theaters on April 25th. And I don't know, this one was one of those films that I respected the filmmaking, I respected the cinematography, I really appreciated the period piece detail, I think the performances are great, but the story itself was so not my thing. And so it's one that was very difficult for me to place, because I think it was like better made than a number of the movies below it, but also I would probably enjoy revisiting a couple of the films below it more. I don't know, this whole middle section of the list is just kind of a chaos for me. But On Swift Horses essentially is this film where you have Daisy Edgar Jones and you have Will Poulter. They play a married couple. It's right after the Korean War, so it's a period piece film. And then you enter Will Poulter's brother, played by Jacob Elordi, and his presence kind of creates this awakening inside of Daisy Edgar Jones in a number of ways. And where it initially starts off feeling like this is going to become one of those really tense, like, love triangle movies, where the wife's going to fall for the brother and it's going to cause tension, it very quickly turns into something else where the story literally splinters in 2. And you have Jacob Elordi that goes off on his own into this little adventure in Vegas, where he kind of starts to explore and embrace his homosexuality with this guy that he falls in love with, that he works at a casino with. And then you have Daisy Edgar Jones that goes off and she starts to have this thrill of gambling on horses, which somewhat leads to the title. It's kind of double meaning. And also starts to explore her sexuality with some other people. And it's meant to be kind of a movie where it's a film about awakening and embracing your true self and realizing your true self, and, you know, having the courage and the strength to embrace that side of you despite how much it might hurt other people or how much it's taboo, especially in the period that this film takes place in. And I can appreciate all that. The issue that I had is that I felt so bad for the Will Poulter character the entire time that I could never really embrace the journey of either of those 2 main characters, because to me, they were like the villains of the movie. I mean, you have Will Poulter here, who is a good, well-meaning husband that does everything right. And you have Daisy Edgar Jones, that's his wife, that's literally off fucking other people, fucking women, spending money that she's not supposed to spend, even though she wins a lot of it still, just betraying her marriage in so many different ways. And then his brother, who has this constant sexual tension with his wife and also fucks him over in numerous ways financially as well. And so you have these 2 people who are kind of the main focus of your story. And all the while I'm just sitting here going, I can't celebrate whatever I'm supposed to celebrate with these 2 characters, because I just feel like they're kind of assholes. So that was kind of the difficulty that I had with this one. It was such an odd story in the way that it was told for me to feel like comfortable with what they were doing. So, I mean, like I said, very well-made film, very good performances. It's shot beautifully. Just very confusing message, very confusing what I'm supposed to take away from this, what I'm supposed to be happy about. And it also felt a little disjointed, I'll say that too, when having the two separate protagonists, two different stories. It does feel like it lacks a little bit of focus there. But I did really enjoy the way that the movie ended. I'll say that. Even though I was still kind of a little questioned on exactly what I'm supposed to celebrate, I think it ends on a really nice, sweet, beautiful note that I think I heard is different from the book as well. This is an adaptation of a novel. So it's a film that's absolutely not for me. It's not one that I would have chosen to watch, but I was at the film festival. It was a big premiere, so I figured, fuck it, I'll give it a shot, go out of my comfort zone, and appreciated a lot of the filmmaking. The story, I have a lot of questions about. Number 13, we have The Surrender. Now, of all of the movies on this list, this is the one that probably got the rawest deal from me because I was exhausted. You get to a point in a film festival where your brain just starts to get fatigued with watching movies, and oftentimes you're out until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and then you have to wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning to secure your tickets, and then your first showing's at 10, 10:30, 11. And so I saw this movie at 11 a.m., at the Hyatt Regency after being up until probably 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, getting like 5.5 hours of sleep. And this is a very slow burn movie. So I think if I had watched this in any other context, I might have liked it a lot more, even though it's still in the top half or so of this list. Everybody else that I saw this with was moved significantly more than I was. And it's been recently acquired by Shudder, no release date yet. So if what this movie is about intrigues you, I highly suggest you check it out. And eventually I probably will watch it a second time, and I almost guarantee I'll like it more than what I did in this first experience. But it's basically about a mother and a daughter who has recently lost the father, the husband, the patriarch of their family. And they're going through this ritualistic process to try to bring him back to life. And so the whole thing is this slow burn, psychological, demonic kind of horror that is exploring grief and exploring the inability to let go of a loved one. And I think that these central performances are really good. You got the woman from The Boys here playing the daughter, Colby Menifee, couldn't think of her name, and Kate Burton plays the mom. You'll recognize both of these actresses. And so performance-wise, I think it was done really well. Some of the scare scenes are done really well here too. I think they do a really good job at, having this commentary, having this metaphor of grief while also being very interesting with the way that they're just executing this ritual. And the note that it ends on definitely is one that I think is powerful if you're somebody that can relate to this. I fortunately have not had a situation yet where I've had to let go of a parent. Hopefully I won't have to anytime soon. But if you're somebody that does, like at least one or two of the people that I was with, have a much more emotional reaction to what they're exploring than I did. So overall, I thought this was good. It was just slow, and it was a bad time to watch this type of film, but still recommend it. Coming at number 12 is a film that I had the hardest time placing on this list because I was very lukewarm about it, but at the same time, I feel like I would revisit this film, and I think that there's a shot that I would enjoy it more on rewatch, more than a number of the films that are below it. And that's going to be Death of a Unicorn. Death of a Unicorn was one of my most anticipated films at this festival. It actually was a movie that I saw the trailer right before I got ready to record my top 10 most anticipated movies of the year. Thought it was hilarious, and instantly Death of a Unicorn got put on that list. So I was really looking forward to this one. And what I will say is that it is a fun movie, as I expected it to be. It's a fun premise. You have a phenomenal cast here, all that do a really good job, to the point where the movie almost feels like it can't figure out which character to focus on because they're all doing so good. I think that the inherent idea about killer unicorns and kind of doing the horror comedy route and having a cosmic flavor there and even a little bit of Jurassic Park influence in there, all those things are great. And I think that Will Poulter has some great jokes numerous times throughout the film. I think Anthony Carrigan is the star of the show to me and kind of like the unsung hero because most of his jokes were the best to me, and they're all like background jokes. It's him saying something really subtly as he walks in and off screen or him doing something physical in the background. So I had a good amount of fun with the movie, but I was expecting this thing to kill, and it just didn't kill. Something about the pacing of the comedy in this film, I feel like it really kind of petered out in the back half. As soon as it started to crank up the horror side of things, I didn't feel like the comedy was hitting as well. It was kind of going a little bit more one note, a little bit more redundant with its style of humor. And the horror side of things, while still being fun, is very CGI. It's very over the top, and so it's not as, it doesn't have as much punch or as much bite as I would have liked it to have to kind of counterbalance all of the goofy comedy side of things. So it's ultimately a film that was very disappointing for me. It's probably the most disappointing film on the list because I had such high expectations for it. But I did have some fun with it, and there's something about it that just makes me feel like if I give it a second chance, there's a shot I'll like it more. But we'll find out whenever that day comes. Maybe I'll like it less. Coming at number 11 is going to be Good Boy, and this is another film that has not been acquired yet, so no release date yet, but this is a film that is a haunted house style horror film where the entire thing is told through the perspective of the dog. And when you know what they had to go through to get this movie made, having the dog be pretty much 90% of the cast and having to shoot around that, and having to spend 3-4 years making a film because of that stylistic choice, it makes you appreciate the movie much more than I would have had I not known all of that. And so it's a movie that's really interesting. It's a nice, unique spin on the subgenre. And of course, if you're a dog lover, you're a dog owner, it's going to hit you in the feels a number of times just because he literally is a good boy. So the whole time you're just like, I love this fucking dog. And what it's kind of exploring by the end of it, which I don't want to say specifically what because it's going to give away a lot of the film, I think they do a good job at satisfying that. But it's a movie that is one of those things that feels like it would have been more entertaining as a short film than a full-length film. I don't think there's enough here that sustains your entertainment and your interest for a full 90-minute runtime. So not a film that I would ever watch again, but there's enough unique about it, and I admire the filmmaking enough that it's this high.
This film was incredible, and as a dog lover, it just pulled at my heartstrings, and I was in absolute shambles. This film was scary. It was nerve-wracking. My emotions were in my throat the entire time. And even though it emotionally just devastated me, I went and saw it a second time. I'm a huge fan of independent film and the story on how this film was made. It was made in 400 days over the course of three years. Indy the dog gave a performance of a lifetime. I've never seen a dog act and emote like what I saw in that film before. Give Indy an Oscar. He deserves it. This was just an incredible film. I hope this film gets distribution. Don't be scared to go see this film because you are a dog lover. This is ultimately a movie for dog lovers. It's incredible. I can't wait for more people to see Good Boy.
Coming at number 10 for me is going to be a film called Friendship. And this is like I Love You Man for psychopaths. This is a very dark comedy that is led by Tim Robinson as well as Paul Rudd as kind of the smaller side character there. And if you are familiar with Tim Robinson, this is apparently like his signature style of humor. He's got a TV show out there. I've never seen it. I know him more from like memes and things that have popped up on the internet. You sure about that? He's that guy. And so this was kind of my first introduction to his style of humor, which is cringe humor. It's a guy who is so awkward and so socially moronic that it's so uncomfortable you kind of laugh out of out of discomfort. And what I will say about the film is that it's a style of comedy that I'm certainly not used to. So it was a little bit of an intro class for me. And there was a number of spots in this film that got huge laughs out of the whole theater, including myself. There is some really, really funny shit in this film. And I think that I often enjoy when you get a dark comedy or a black comedy because even more so when you're going for this uncomfortable cringe style of humor, there's something that's appealing about how off those tones are. And you have that's balanced pretty well in this film. I'll get a little bit more into that, but I enjoyed the tone here. And I think that the whole story, this tried and true thing that we've seen in a number of comedies where you have just two opposite personalities and kind of like the cable guy, one of them is way more obsessed and focused on being friends with the other, which eventually makes the other person very uncomfortable. And you just see that play out. So we've seen a number of movies do it because it's a very funny scenario that is usually get a lot of comedic value out of. The issue that I had with the film that made it not quite get to where I would get really excited about it and recommend it as much as some of the things above it is that I think the festival experience actually hurt me a little bit on this one, which is a rarity. Oftentimes when you're in a big premiere and you're in a big theater packed full of people that are there to see it on opening night for its first day and everybody's pumped, if it's a comedy especially, it's like the humor is so infectious and everybody's laughing that you laugh more. You laugh harder at things you would already laugh at, and you laugh at things that you normally might not laugh at just because you're enjoying yourself so much. And oddly enough, I kind of had the opposite experience with this film where the crowd that was sitting close to me, especially like a couple of dudes to my left and a few people behind me, were literally dying laughing at every single line of this film. And I'm here to tell you, as funny as it is, there's a number of lines in the movie that aren't fucking jokes. And so it'll be something like, Tim Robinson grabbing a coffee cup and they're like, ah! And I'm just sitting there confused, like, what's the bit? What the fuck did I miss? What's so funny about that? And so if this makes sense, because I was just so off with the experience that everybody else around me was having, it just affected my enjoyment level of the movie after a while. It was almost like it was starting to frustrate me because one part of my brain was thinking they were being obnoxious and the other part of my brain was getting frustrated at like, what am I missing? Like there's got to be a fucking joke there that I'm just too stupid to see. And so both of those emotions were kind of clashing through a good bit of this film that led my experience to be a little worse than I think it would have been. Now, I do want to rewatch this film at home with my wife because my wife, I think, is made for this type of humor. She has a very different style of humor from me. And I think if she loves this movie, I'll have an even better experience with it. So we'll see about that one. Much like Death of a Unicorn, second watches, can't really grade it on that till I have it. But one thing that I will say, aside from just all of that, is that I felt like this movie was heading very deliberately in a direction in its third act to go very dark with where things went. And I was actually looking forward to that because some of the best black comedies of all time just get shockingly dark out of nowhere. And it's awesome when they do it right. And so I saw that in its sights and it felt like they either weren't interested in going there or didn't have the guts to go there. And so it kind of ended on a little bit more of a whimper than with a punch. And that could have made all the difference for me to put this a couple of spots higher. So Friendship, if you love Tim Robinson, you're going to love this movie. There was a number of people I talked to that were like, this was the best comedy I've seen in years. So if you're interested, be sure to check it out. Coming to theaters May 9th. Number 9, we have We Bury the Dead. And this is a zombie apocalypse film starring Daisy Ridley. And what was interesting about this movie is both the setup of this zombie apocalypse, as well as the tone and the direction that they go, where essentially there was this weapon that was set off right outside of Australia that kills like 500,000 people. And like it just shuts off the electric system in their brain. And so at the 500,000 people just drop dead in an instant. And so you have Daisy Ridley that's a part of this cleanup crew going to literally clean up 500,000 bodies off of, I think it was Tanzania. And some of these bodies start to reanimate and start to show signs of humanity still inside of them and some kind of electric, some kind of signals still going, firing in their brain, hence zombies. And so it's not an outright zombie film in the way that you think of them, where there's just these flesh-eating monsters walking or running around. It's more so exploring like what life is left inside of them, as well as exploring grief, which is a common theme in a lot of these movies we talked about today, and some other things. And so I appreciated how different it was. I appreciated how it used a subgenre that maybe up until about 5 years ago was maybe the most overexposed subgenre in horror, and does something really genuinely unique with it. I thought Daisy Ridley was great in it. You also have Brendan Thwaites here, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, who I've seen before, but here he's really entertaining. Like, I almost think he's missing from a chunk of the film, and I wish he was there the entire time. Now, the actual character arc with Daisy Ridley, where her driving force this entire film is that she has joined this cleanup crew because her husband was right on the outskirts of where this weapon was set off, and she's trying to get to where he was to see if he's still alive or if he's one of these 500,000 bodies laying on the ground. And where that eventually goes in the third act, I don't know if it was completely satisfying for me. It's a movie that I need to watch again. I think in some ways it was subversive. I think in other ways it was kind of unsatisfying. So it would have been maybe 2 or 3 spots higher if I had enjoyed the ultimate payoff at the end a little bit better, as well as the final note that it ends on, which was another thing that I was kind of mixed on. But overall, if you're a fan of zombie films and you want to see something that's genuinely different, this is genuinely different, and I really liked it for that. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Clown in a Cornfield, and this is a film that is an adaptation of a series of books. So if it's successful, if you guys end up liking it, very strong possibility this turns into a new horror franchise, which I'm totally on board for because I really enjoyed this film. And if you're a slasher fan, this is the film that you want to keep your eyes out for. It's coming to theaters on May 9th. And to give a brief premise, you basically have this girl and her father that moves to this little farm town in the middle of Missouri, I believe. And their big mascot for the town is Friendo the Clown. And so you have all these people that are like all the adults. It's kind of a movie that has a bit of a commentary on like generational difference, generational gaps. So you have like all the boomers, if you will. And then you have all of the Gen Z or younger kids that are the wild youth that now Quinn is being kind of inducted into. And very quickly out of the gate, Friendo the Clown literally just goes around and starts murdering all of the young kids, all of the wayward youth of this town. And the first 35, 40 minutes or so, while being fun, you know, I love a good slasher, even the most run-of-the-mill of them, it feels very cliche. It feels very much like, okay, this is just a killer clown slasher movie. Okay, fine. And then it's very much not. On a Dime, a movie that feels like it's very much just kind of sticking to the basics, sticking to the cliches, goes very much against that. And I don't want to give you any more context to that, but as soon as that happens, then the movie really takes off. And then it's like, oh, now I get what the appeal is. Now I understand why this is playing here. Now I understand why I should be excited. Let's fucking go. And this was just a really fun movie. If you love slasher films, you love killer clown movies, you're going to have a blast with this one. I think that the characters are a lot of fun. I think it does a good job at balancing the comedy with the horror. There's some really fun kills here. You know, a number of them are aided with CGI, so it's not necessarily like a practical effects workshop type film, but still, it was a good time. And I think that there's a lot of potential here, as I said, for a really fun franchise going forward. The only thing that I would say is a bit of a negative towards the end. Like I wasn't as surprised as I wanted to be or as satisfied as I wanted to be with the ultimate reveals in the third act, like the motivations and everything like that. But I still had a really fun time with this one. And it's important to note that the majority of the people that I was with, the horror TikTokers especially, a lot of them, this was one of, if not their favorite film of the festival.
Clown in a Cornfield, I love the book so much. I was super excited for the movie to come out. I love Adam Caesar. I think he's a wonderful author. He's an awesome friend. And it was just awesome to see it come to life on the big screen.
There is just quite nothing like being in a movie theater with a bunch of other horror fans. Everyone is screaming and cheering as these small town kids get slashed. Made me feel like we were back in the good old days, and I can't wait to do it all again.
And Kevin Durand is one of the main characters here, and alongside Aaron Paul was just a fantastic experience to have after really enjoying the movie. So I love Kevin Durand for a number of movies, but of course a lot of you guys know I'm an Abigail whore. That was my #1 movie last year. And so I was actually genuinely surprised. I saw this much earlier than Ash, and he was the first person that I saw at this entire festival that everybody else went to go leave, and he just walked right to the front of the stage, got down on his knee in an expensive looking suit, and just sat there and talked with fans for God knows how long, probably until they kicked him out. And so he was shaking hands with people. He was taking pictures. He was, talking about movies with everybody and thanking everybody. And when I got up to him, shook my hand, told him I'm a huge fan of Abigail. I said, I've saw 130 new release films last year, and Abigail was my #1. And he seemed to really appreciate that. And we were talking about how I enjoyed Clown in the Cornfield. And he's like, man, it's so fun. And you could tell he's somebody that just loves watching some of his work, like the people that he's with. Like he was watching Clown in a Cornfield as if he was one of the audience members just having a blast. And that's awesome. But not even my experience with him is what endeared me so much to him and made me love him so much more. It was what happened right after that when Sean walked up. And Sean kind of reiterated some of the things that I was saying. And then he said, like, I told my son he's a huge fan of, Planet of the Apes or whatever, and I was going to meet you. And he was excited. He didn't even ask Kevin Durand to do this. Kevin Durand just heard that and he said, oh, pull out your phone. Let's do a video for your son. And just sat there and sent a video to Sean's son, Liam. And I was like, that is so fucking cool. That is so fucking cool when you see somebody that has had, you know, maybe taken a while to really hit the mainstream, but he's been working for decades. He's been in movies for 20-something years as a character actor. Having somebody like that that just loves his fans, even the ones that aren't in attendance, and clearly is never going to forget that. Like right alongside Aaron Paul, I love those things so much. I love having somebody that I adore their work, and then they turn out to be this awesome person as well. So I enjoyed Clown in a Cornfield, but meeting Kevin Durand, that just put the icing on the cake as this being one of the best experiences of the festival for me. Coming in at number 7 is a film called Drop. This is the latest Christopher Landon and Blumhouse film that's going to be coming to theaters, I think April 11th. Yes, April 11th, so keep your eyes out for it. And this is just a good old-fashioned thriller. And Christopher Landon's somebody that I enjoy his work. He did the Happy Death Day movies. He did Freaky. He did a number of others. And so I like the way that his sense of humor works into his movies. I like the way that he blends genres together. And what was intriguing to me, because I had seen a piece of the trailer. I never watch a full Blumhouse trailer. And after seeing the trailer, doing my little out-of-theater reaction for this one, I would advise you not to watch the trailer if you have not already seen it, because it absolutely shows the whole movie. But it's a really straightforward concept for Christopher Landon to do. Yeah, there's not really much of a genre blend here. It's a very straightforward, modern type of thriller movie that just has like a modern technological flavor to it. And so I was curious if that was going to feel like a step down for him. And what I will say, the thing that I enjoyed most about this movie is that as a director, I think this was actually a step up for him. It was the most impressive thing that I've seen him do as a director. You know, the visually what he's able to bring to this movie, the style that he's able to execute in here. I think it's his most confident film yet. So that's awesome to see. But as somebody who really loves just good old-fashioned thrillers, I had a good time with this one. You have a woman that is going off to this date. She's got like an online dating, so I wouldn't say it's a blind date, but she's meeting this guy for the first time for a first date. And while she's in the middle of this date, she starts to get these very sinister drops sent to her phone, eventually leading to a drop that tells her that you're going to assassinate your date, or I'm going to murder your sister and your son that are waiting at home for you. And so the movie becomes like this mystery and this, you know, rising tension experience where she's trying to figure out who it is, figure out how, if at all, she can get out of this situation, and also trying to figure out if she wants to kill her date to save her loved ones at home. And I thought it was a very entertaining movie. I think that there's a lot of solid thrills, a lot of solid tension here. There's some good comedy in here, mostly from the server that keeps coming back to their table. There's some good situational humor in there. You know, with Christopher Landon, I knew there was going to be some good laughs, and it's not as inherently comedic as some of his other films, but it's still there. I think aside from just the visual style, liking having the text messages and the drops show up in visuals on the screen rather than just showing her phone 75,000 times, as well as like this POV thing that he does where when she's focusing on somebody, suspecting them, like the lights go out around them and it kind of shows you this POV focus effect, but also just the set design. They built this entire restaurant just for this movie, and it's got a very unique, almost like Kubrick vibe to it that I thought was very cool. The only flaw with this film that is going to vary greatly for everybody that watches it is how much suspension of disbelief you can tolerate to go on this ride, because it asks a lot. First of all, just the inherent premise of this film, when you start to realize the overall plot, like it's the least efficient, most over-the-top, ridiculous plot you could possibly have to kill seemingly just a regular guy. And so it's a very over-the-top scenario from the get. But as the movie goes on, the one that was much more of a struggle for me is buying into how much the guy that she's with is able to tolerate as she continues to behave erratically and weird and is going away from the table and is just breaking down into tears and just acting like a complete psycho because of the situation. I don't give a fuck if I'm sitting across the table on a first date with Salma Hayek. Every guy has his limit, and every guy on earth would have been out of there within the first 20 minutes of this woman's bullshit. And so that was the big thing for me, where it was like, man, you are really asking a lot out of me to get me to believe that this dude is sticking around for another hour plus of this nonsense, especially with how good looking of a guy that he is. Like, maybe that's taboo to say, but this guy's clearly drowning in pussy. He does not need to stick around for this long to maybe hook up with this chick. So that was the big thing for me where I was like, okay, I'm just going to accept it and go with the flow, but this is absolute bullshit. As well as some things that happen in the third act that I'm not even going to get into because it's third act shit. But I still really enjoyed this film. If you like thrillers, if you like thrill rides like this, and you like, some espionage and some tension and stuff, I had a really good time with it. It just asks a lot from your disbelief. So walk in knowing that. Number 6 was one of the biggest surprises of the festival because it was a film that was not on my radar, and I literally only watched it because I was able to get an express pass for it. And that's a film called Summer of '69. Now, this is already acquired by Hulu. It's going to be coming out at some point in this summer of 2025, so keep your eyes out for it. And this is a film that is written and directed by Jillian Bell, who you'll know from a number of comedies. I know her best as the antagonist in 22 Jump Street, but she's been in a ton of stuff. And what I will say about Summer of '69 is that this might be the first female-centric sex comedy that I really connected with. And some people are going to hear that and they're going to get the worst interpretation out of it. Look, when you're a guy and your experiences that you look back on as a teenager were very much in the shoes of a guy. Movies like American Pie and Road Trip and all the comedies that I grew up with that were very male-centric, they're a lot more relatable. It's a lot easier to identify with that because I was that person. I went through that. Versus a lot of the female sex comedies like Bridesmaids or Blockers or things like that is from the opposite perspective, which oftentimes I can't relate to. So I can still enjoy them, can still think they're very funny, but I don't necessarily connect with them. And what I loved about Summer of '69 is that rather than it really honing in on the female teenage horny experience for a female-led sex comedy, they really hammer home much more universal themes like feeling comfortable in your own skin and, rising up to be the best version of yourself and not being so crippled by what other people think. And that is relatable no matter what sex or gender you are. And so being that was really the ultimate message of the movie, I found myself really enjoying the fact that I have a movie that is all females talking about the female teenage, coming of age sex experience that I can totally get on board with because I relate to everything that they're going through. So the story of this movie, you think Summer of '69, you probably automatically assume this is going to be a teenage sex comedy set in 1969, but you would be wrong. This is a modern comedy that is telling the story of a young, nerdy girl that finds out that the popular guy that she has the hots for is single, and she hears through the grapevine that his favorite thing in the world is 69. So she goes and basically hires a stripper for a week to be like her trainer and teach her about sex in 69 so that she can hook up with the most popular guy in school. And that's just a fucking fun premise right off the bat. It was actually funny. Justin from Slasher Talk, the morning before I went to go see this, I said, I'm going to see Summer of '69. And he's like, 69. He's like, I feel terrible. I shouldn't have even made that joke. I said, well, it's funny because that's actually the plot of the movie. So you're not terrible at all. So that was a good laugh between us. But a really fun premise, a really fun cast, both the girl who plays the main character as well as the actress that plays the stripper. And the dynamic that I really enjoyed about them is that sometimes I feel like, especially with female sex comedies in the modern age, like there's so many taboo things that comedies aren't allowed to do anymore for some stupid fucking reason. So they replace genuinely funny situational humor with just being as overtly graphic with the dialogue and with the profanity as they can. And they kind of do that here, but it's a balance because the main character, the teenage girl, is more the innocent, nerdy, kind of awkward character. And all of the trash mouth stuff comes from the stripper character. And so it's balanced and it's much more of a believable dialogue scenario between these two characters because of who they are. So it's a movie that, like, I'm not going to put it on the pedestal of these films, but it's going for like a bit of a mix of American Pie with a little bit of 16 Candles and a little bit of Risky Business. And I just had a really good time with it. I got a lot of good laughs with this one. I think it was heartwarming. I think that the way that it pays everything off by the third act was really satisfying. I like the comedic style of the writing and the actors. And so I had a really good time with this one. I wasn't expecting anything from it, but I will absolutely be watching it again when it hits Hulu this summer. Really quick before we get into my top 5, guys, just wanted to let you know that I have revamped my merch store recently, and you can find it by just typing in codyleach.store. Or you can just look at the little shelf down here right underneath the video description and check out some of the things that I have put there as products. And we have t-shirts, we have hats, we have hoodies, we have tank tops, bunch of other stuff, a lot of really cool designs. So if you guys want some Cody Leach merch, if you want to be able to wear something while also supporting this channel, please check that out. There's also links in the video description, and I appreciate anything that you guys buy. And if there's any other ideas for not only designs, but types of merch that you guys want, feel free to put that in the comment section below. And now let's move on to the top 5. Coming in at number 5 is a movie called It Ends, which ironically was the final film that I saw at South by Southwest. So it's funny how things work out that way. But It Ends, of all of the movies that I saw in this festival that were trying to go for something metaphorical or allegorical or have some kind of an underlying commentary, I think this one did the best job at satisfying everything by the end. Essentially, the plot you have here is you have this group of 4 teenage friends that are in this like Jeep Cherokee or this Jeep Wrangler, and they're going down this road in the middle of the woods. And then they find out that this road just never ends, and they are stuck in it, almost like purgatory. And so the whole movie, it starts off very sinister, very horrific, and very tension-filled. And as it goes on, it kind of intentionally lets go of a lot of that and becomes much more of like this character piece. And the whole movie essentially is exploring everybody's drive to live and how far somebody will go, how far somebody will maintain faith that they will get to where they're trying to go. People deciding whether or not they want to keep trekking down this road or if they want to get out and explore, if they just give up. Like, there's a lot of different things at play here, a couple different ways to interpret the film that is really interesting and something that makes an interesting discussion piece after it's done. But I think the characters were written and performed very well. And the intentional tonal shift that happens throughout the movie, where the director phrased it as, I intentionally made the movie more boring as it went along, I think actually serves the story very well. And for having most of the movie, much like Hallow Road, take place just inside of a car, you get a lot out of it. And oddly enough, I saw this right after seeing Hallow Road. And so I think maybe even my disappointment with Hallow Road made me appreciate this movie even more, because I felt like it landed the plane in a very satisfying way, where obviously I felt the opposite about Hallow Road. But ultimately, when this movie ended, I was like, wow, that was actually really profound. You found a way to satisfy your surface level storyline of these kids stuck in this very supernatural situation, while also coming to an ending point, an exclamation point on what it is you're trying to discuss and talk about. And you found a way to satisfy both of those by the end of it. And so I ended up really enjoying this one. I don't think it's a movie that I would probably rewatch very often, maybe ever. So if it was, it might even crack my top 3. But even with that being said, for a movie that I might just watch once, it's here in the top 5. So of all of the movies, the indie horror, supernatural type movies that I saw that are going for very similar things as this during this festival, this one was easily the best and most satisfying for me. I don't see a release date or distribution listed anywhere, so it's one of those ones you're going to have to keep your eyes out for, but absolutely keep your eyes out for It Ends.
My favorite moment from South by Southwest is I went to see this film called It Ends. And one of the young actors that was in the film, I went up to speak to him after the film was over. And while I was speaking to him, Gabriel Luna walked right down beside me, shook my hand, and he put his hands on this young man's shoulders, looked him dead into his eyes, and said, "That was one of the most riveting performances that I ever seen in my entire life." So my moment was seeing this young actor have his moment, and it was an unbelievable moment at South by Southwest.
Coming at number 4 for me is going to be The Accountant 2. Now, I am somebody who I absolutely love old school, mid-budget action thrillers. So this is just a movie that is absolutely my type of thing. If it's not your type of thing, I could see this being much lower on the list. I really enjoyed the first Accountant. Definitely had my issues with it, but I thought there was a lot of promise there. I loved the cast. I really enjoyed the bit of action that we got in there and the style of it. And I've been, like pretty much everybody else who liked the first movie, just puzzled for 8 years now about how we have not gotten a sequel to it, because it so deliberately sets up a sequel or a series of sequels with the way that that movie wraps up. And we finally are getting it now. And I actually think that The Accountant 2 was a little bit better than the first film. Now, they're so close that I could see everybody going a little bit differently. Some people are going to love the first one slightly more. Some people are going to love the second one slightly more, but they're close enough where I don't see anybody looking at either of these films saying that one is just overwhelmingly better. They're very consistent. But what I liked about this second film a little bit more than the first one is that because we're not doing this mystery and this reveal regarding the John Bernthal character, we're able to have a situation where Ben Affleck and John Bernthal are teamed up for the majority of this film. And that is such a great pairing, not only in the bit of action scenes that we get, but even more so with the comedy scenes that we get. I think The Accountant 2 is much more of like a buddy comedy film than I would say an action thriller. Definitely is got a lot of action and thrills in here, but the buddy comedy side of it is the larger piece of the pie this time around, which might seem jarring when I say that, but it totally works.
You know, for me, the challenge, of course, was, you know, the months and months that I spent training to line dance. It really qualifies as a stunt for me.
You did a great job.
Tom Cruise has nothing on me. Just in terms of line dancing.
Having the two different characters of Ben Affleck's character being very quirky and odd because he has autism and he just takes things very literal and he's kind of emotionally detached, paired against and contrasted with John Bernthal's just like loose cannon character. And it's comedy gold having these two brothers together, and a lot of situational humor, a lot of great dialogue between them. And so their chemistry with each other, their dynamic, I think carries this movie and is absolutely the piece that sets it just a bit over Accountant 1 for me. I do wish we got a bit more action, but the action that we do get is very good. It's very exciting. It's shot well. The choreography and the hand-to-hand combat scenes are good. The bullets and explosions and everything towards the third act is very good. And what they do, they set up in a very conventional mid-budget action thriller way. There's not like this really dynamic villain that's a big personality in the movie or a standout, but they just give you enough about these villains to make you hate them and to make you look forward to them getting their asses kicked by Bernthal and Affleck. And that's satisfying enough. When you get to the third act and you start to see them just taking these dudes out, you're like, fuck yeah, take them out. Take them out slow. The big weakness with this film, however, which is actually the same thing that I would have said for the first Accountant, is that I think that the plot is a little over convoluted and focused on being twisty. And I don't think it completely comes together. Both films kind of felt that way by the end when they're trying to do these little twist reveals where I'm like, not really buying that. Just get back to the action. And so I think you kind of have the same issue here where they're going very much for telling a very simple plot, but telling it in a way where we're purposely withheld information to kind of artificially make it this twist reveal that never really needed to be that. And it's not really like a twist that's ultimately satisfying or shocking. So it's just a piece of it that I think everything else more than makes up for it and more than carries the weight of the film. But by the time we get the third film, which is supposedly in production, I think it's time we can put away that, or at least try to do a better job with that and just focus on the action and the comedy. But if you're a fan of the first film, highly recommend you check this thing out. It's coming to theaters on April 25th. And I also have a full review for this one that's already out. So if you want some more thoughts, me to expand on everything I just said, click up here and check that out. But Accountant fans should be very happy with this one. Coming in at number 3 is kind of the oddball on this list because it's a TV series that I only saw the first 2 episodes of, but I did see it there, so I wanted to just basically rank it as an experience. And as far as the experience goes, watching the first 2 episodes of The Studio ranks this high for me because I had an absolute fucking blast with this show. Now, since I have left South by Southwest and been home, I have watched nearly the entirety of the rest of the season, so I have only continued to have a great time. It did not fall off. It only got better, actually, after the first 2 episodes, which I already highly enjoyed, so I'm just going to give you nothing but huge thumbs up and recommendations for this show. This is a show that is written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, and it stars Seth Rogen as well as Kathryn Hahn and number of other comedic actors, a ton of huge cameos with Bryan Cranston, Ron Howard, Martin Scorsese. And it's basically a story about Seth Rogen, who is this newly appointed head of this movie studio. And the whole show is essentially satiring and sending up how stupid and ridiculous studios can be, and studio heads, and decisions that come out of studios can be. And I just think it's fucking badass that you got Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg wrote a script for a show and went and pitched it to a studio and said, here, do you want to buy this show that makes you all look like fucking idiots? And they got somebody to buy it, pay for it, and distribute it. Who is Apple? Apple has fuck you money, so they just don't care.
When we accidentally killed a drifter late one summer's eve in a bar brawl, we immediately called Matt Chernis, Jamie Ehrlich, and Zach Van Amberg at Apple, who used all of their power and resources to cover the whole thing up. It's like it never happened. So a super special shout out to Zach, Jamie, and Matt.
Everything we have just said is 100%
all of it is real.
But yeah, the studio, like, I didn't really know what to expect from this. I went to go see it purely out of curiosity and because I would be in the same room with Seth Rogen and a huge Seth Rogen fan. And I was not expecting this to be even half as funny as it is. But when I tell you that I was laughing my ass off almost start to finish throughout the first 2 episodes, this is one of the funniest things that I've seen in years, especially TV-wise. I think it's one of the smartest written shows that I've ever seen. Now, that does come with a little bit of a caveat. This is very much an inside baseball type of humor. So you have to be somebody who's psycho like me and talks about movies and looks up things about movies and knows all the studio decisions and announcements and rumors and things that are canceled or changed or reshot. Like, you have to live in that world to understand a lot of what they're joking about. And if you're not, I think a lot of the humor might go over your head. But if you are somebody like me, my God, did they do a brilliant job at just making fun out of so many things that us as movie fans just beat our heads against the wall and go, what the fuck are you guys doing? How do you spend millions of dollars on this and not see how stupid this is? Like, for instance, one of the main plot lines of the pilot episode is that you have Bryan Cranston, who is the CEO of this studio, that is mandating that Seth Rogen put into production a Kool-Aid movie, specifically off of the success of Barbie, because he equates the two. And Seth Rogen is somebody who likes more artistic films. He's a little bit more into doing something that's got an auteur type of flavor to it, not just like studio schlock. And so he has the studio head telling him to make schlock, and he wants to make something that could win Oscars. And so he approaches Martin Scorsese to get him to direct a Kool-Aid film. And so that's as far as I'm going to tell you. There's much more funnier things that develop with that bit and with that storyline. But that's the type of things that we're doing here. The second episode is called The Oneer. And it's all about how ridiculously over the top and pain in the ass doing one-shot sequences are, while the entire episode is shot in a one-shot.
I actually want to talk to you about award season. Just make sure you keep your winter clear. We have
Okay, Matt.
There's actually a lot of one-shots in this entire series because it's trying to keep that chaotic, tension-filled, just ridiculous nature of what is going on. So I think this show is just fucking brilliant. I've seen 7 out of the 10 episodes so far. My favorite episode isn't even a part of these first 2 that I fucking loved. So this is coming to Apple TV Plus on the 26th, where they're going to debut those first 2 episodes. And I think every week after that will be the next episode. If you love movies, if you love movie history and movie making, and you like the Seth Rogen style of humor, treat yourself and check this out, because as somebody that bitches constantly about how comedy is just dying a horrible death in Hollywood right now, the studio gives me hope. It gives me hope that maybe we're going to start to crawl out of the rubble. Coming in at number 2 was the best horror film that I saw at South by Southwest, and for a majority of the festival was my number 1 film by a landslide, until it was eventually overtaken by something we're going to talk about shortly. But number 2 to me is a film called Together. This has been purchased by Neon. It made a huge splash at Sundance. They bought it out at that, and it's going to be coming to theaters wide on August 1st. So we got a little bit of a wait, but I'm telling you, you guys are not fucking ready for this movie, okay? Like, this to me is going to be the what the fuck did I just watch horror film of 2025. And I just loved everything about it. It's a movie that is really hard to describe because it's going for so many different things, evidenced by the fact that the teaser trailer just dropped yesterday. And I advise everybody to not watch any trailers or anything for this film. Don't read synopsis. Just try to walk in blind like I did and just get taken for this wild fucking ride. You have no idea where you're going. But if you don't want to do that, you can't wait, or you need to see a little bit of something to sell you, I actually think the teaser trailer that they just dropped does a good job at not showing a whole lot at all. But also by that, I don't think they really convey the tone or what the movie really is, and maybe that's going to be a hard selling point for some people. So all I will tell you about what Together is you have Dave Franco and Allison Brie, who are married in real life, and they're playing a married couple in this movie, who buy this, rural kind of farmhouse way off into the fucking boonies, and they come across something that essentially curses them or infects them, and it makes them have this physical need to be with each other, hence the film's title, Together. And that is all you need to know. I'm not going to say anything else to describe this film, where it goes, or how it explores that plot.
Together, I just love Dave Franco and Allison Brie, and I was looking forward to like a body horror. I didn't really know what I was walking into, and it was just batshit crazy, bonkers, ooey gooey, and also hilarious. And I just absolutely loved it. I can't wait to watch it again.
And it's a film that it succeeds at doing a lot of different things. Like, I would not say this is a horror comedy, but there's definitely some comedic spots in here that are really well done. And the chemistry between the two leads is very good, which you would hope so, being that it's a married couple playing a married couple.
What about it, which is great.
Oh, they want us forward on the line.
Oh, the line. There's a line.
A voice from behind the screen said, walk to the line. I said, who am I, Johnny Cash?
But they're very good together. There's a body horror angle to it. There's this like curse cultish kind of angle to it. There's the psychological horror side to it. There's this dreamlike quality to it throughout it. It's a movie that you can't really fit neatly into a box. And so as I said, I don't recommend you check out the marketing, but however they decide to market it, that person's going to have a very difficult job. Just know that if you like horror films, not saying that this has anything in comparison to Barbarian, because I know there's a lot of people that do not like Barbarian at all, but a movie like that is just like a big what the fuck, that you don't know at all where it's going. This is that type of movie this year. And I think it's really going to set the horror community on fire whenever it comes out on August 1st. So absolutely love this thing. Had a blast with it. Can't wait to watch it again. I was toying with the notion of foregoing watching one of these 24 films to just go and watch Together a second time. That's how much I really enjoyed it. So keep your eyes peeled for it on August 1st and get yourself ready, because man, this fucking thing is nuts, and I love how nuts it is. Let's get nuts, baby.
My favorite memory from South by Southwest was the first night when we went to the pre-premiere party for Together. I turn, and suddenly in my face is the man who played the roadkill guy from the 2005 House of Wax. And as a reflex, out of my mouth, I just blurted out, House of Wax. And he and the woman he was with look at me and start cracking up, and they were like, who would know that? And I said, I would recognize Trudy's third son anywhere. And they started laughing more. And then later on at the premiere, he walked by me and he pointed at me and he said, House of Wax. And I said, House of Wax. And it was such a beautiful little moment for a horror nerd like me who just is in love with 2000s horror movies. So that was my South by Southwest.
But my number one, the best film that I saw at South by Southwest, is also one of the best films that I've seen at a film festival ever. And I think is inevitably going to end up in at least my top 3 of the year, unless we just have a phenomenal year of movies ahead of us, which that would be awesome. But The Rivals of Amziah King was my favorite film that played at South by Southwest. And I'm going to be dead honest with you. I gave no fucks about this movie. I had no interest in it. I barely understood what it was. Like, the little tiny brief synopsis that we got on the South by Southwest app just basically said that Matthew McConaughey's playing like a beekeeper. And I was like, I don't really give a fuck about that. That doesn't seem like something that's going to be interesting to me. And there was just nothing else that played during that time slot. I was able to get an express pass for the premiere. And so I just figured, you know what, whatever. I'll throw caution to the wind. I'll go check this thing out. I'll be in the room with Matthew McConaughey. That'll be cool. And maybe there'll be something interesting about this. And I'm here to tell you, surprise does not even really convey it. Like, I was shocked at how much I loved this movie. This thing is really genuinely just something special. It's unlike any other movie I've ever seen. And it's something that you can't even really describe what the movie is. And I love that. I love the fact that it doesn't fit easily into some premise that you can deliver to somebody. It doesn't, like, the tone of the film, the approach of it isn't something that you can really even quantify with describing the genre. It is such a unique piece of cinema that I cannot be more thankful I was there to experience it in the best context possible at this premiere, because it was just unbelievable.
This movie is truly a special film. It is magical, and honestly, it is a movie about family. It's about music and how that brings people together. It's about a beekeeper, and then it becomes a heist movie, and it's so much more than what I can even put into words. I highly recommend you keep this one on your radar, because I think Matthew McConaughey is going to win some awards. I think this movie's going to win a ton of awards when award season comes. But this movie is something special, and I haven't seen anything quite like it in a very long time.
To try to give somewhat of an idea of what this movie is you've got Matthew McConaughey, who's playing like this country fried beekeeper who also plays in like a bluegrass band. And at some point in the film, one of his rival honey dealers steals all of his bees, and the young girl who is kind of like his surrogate daughter, who's also like his partner in this business, enacts a plan to try to get all of that back. And me even describing that, it really doesn't convey much about what the movie is, and I've only described like a chunk of the movie. Like, the first act is kind of like a redneck comedy musical in certain ways, and then it turns into like a redneck heist film, and then like a revenge thriller. It's a movie that you have no idea where it's taking you.
Was it mind-boggling? I'm taking that as a big compliment. Mind-boggling. Mind-boggling is good?
Yeah,
mind-boggling
definitely good.
And every time you feel like, I don't know. Are you going to ruin the movie with where you're going with this? This feels so out of nowhere, and it fucking works. It fucking works. And so not only did this have the best laughs of the entire festival, not only did it have some of the best character work and some of the most emotionally satisfying storytelling that I've seen in a very long time, it's filled with outstanding music. And when I say it's a musical, it's not a musical at all in this traditional sense where people are singing dialogue. It's very similar to the movie Rudderless, which you guys know I love. And not since Rudderless has I had a film that kind of gave me these similar feelings after watching it, where music is just a piece of the cinematic language that this movie is speaking through. Not only did it have that, it had the biggest and most shocking gore scene of the entire festival that is chocked full of horror film. And it's not even anywhere close to rubbing shoulders with being a horror film. And so, like, I'm not bullshitting when I tell you, like, the movie starts and it starts with some music where they're just singing like a Dairy Queen parking lot. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm vibing what this movie's going for so far. Maybe this will be a good time. And within the first 7 minutes, something happens that is so hilarious and shocking that I don't know if I've ever been in a theater that is just so in such an uproar of laughter for like a solid 8 minutes. And that's the point where I knew, like, oh my God, I'm in for something special here. And the movie just kept changing and evolving and subverting my expectations all the way through. I mean, it's funny, it's heartfelt, it's shocking at times, it's true movie magic. Like, I don't like to speak in hyperbole. I don't like to really overhype movies, because inevitably somebody's going to see this and say, why the fuck did you act like this was the greatest thing ever when it wasn't? Legitimately, this movie knocked me on my ass, and it feels like something that is like a once in a lifetime thing for me to experience being in the theater with this. It's the only movie I've ever seen at a film festival that actually got a standing ovation. We hear about that all the time in the press, like, oh, The Flash got an 8-minute standing ovation, and, you know, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny got a 20-minute standing ovation. And most of the time when you see the movie, you're like, that's such bullshit. That's just people like clapping for their friends. And this was the first time that I've been there where just regular Joes and critics and movie fans were so moved and entertained and infatuated with a love for a film that they just experienced that everybody stood up and clapped. Never experienced that before. So, I mean, from the moment that Matthew McConaughey walked onto the stage to introduce the film and said that he didn't even realize until somebody told him, I have not been on screen in 6 years. And this is the reason why I chose to come back for this film, and gave us reasons why. From that moment, it was like, okay, maybe I'm really in store for something unique and special here. And my God, was I. So I know a lot of you guys that are here just for the horror, probably not going to give this a shot, but if you just love movies, if you love human stories, if you love movies that are so different and unique, and filmmakers that are clearly just doing their own thing with no fucks to give about what studios expect out of a movie, The Rivals of Amziah King was one of the best things that I've seen in a very long time. And like, if I need to see it a few more times, again, I don't want to overhype the fuck out of this. This has a shot of ending up being one of my favorite films of all time, because I just absolutely loved every single thing about it. So for as much as I loved things like The Studio and Together, Rivals of Amziah King just came in and just blew everything out of the water. And I never would have expected that. If I was a betting man, I would have lost my ass. So if you love films, please keep your eyes peeled for this. I don't know when it's going to be acquired, but this is a movie that it got a lot of buzz, being the fact that it got a huge standing ovation. So I'll be shocked if it doesn't get acquired and get a release date by the end of this year. This might end up being a film that we're talking a lot about in awards season. It's that good. So The Rivals of Amziah King, keep it on your radar. Absolutely loved it. Now, before we wrap this up, one thing that I wanted to end this video on is encouraging all of you guys that no matter where a movie lands on this list, even the bottom 4 that I was pretty negative on, if the premise or the look of the film or the actors or the director or anything about it interests you, I encourage you to check it out. Because one of the things that you'll find about film festivals and most of the films that play there is you'll learn quickly how different everybody's tastes are. Now, I rank these 24 films based off of my own taste, my own preferences, my own experience with them. But the reality is, even the films near the bottom of my list, that was somebody's favorite film of the festival. And I'm sure a number of the films that I have in the top chunk of my list are some people's least favorite films of the festival, especially if you're somebody who finds yourself getting fatigued or failing to be as impressed with the movies that we see go to wide release in theaters every single week that are studio backed with big budgets and large productions. Pretty much this entire list, with the exception of a few of them, are the opposite of that. These are independently made, independently funded. They're wildly unique. They're independent filmmakers that are trying to get their name out there, trying to push some style and creativity out there. So if any of these interest you, please, by all means, regardless of what I said about them, check them out and then come back and let me know what you thought. And on that note as well, my buddy Sean Chandler, who also attended this festival with me, is dropping his ranking today. And I think he only saw like 13 or 14 movies and TV shows, so his list will be smaller, but there's a number of them on there that are movies and shows that I did not watch. So if you made it all the way to the end, and you want to see somebody else's experience and hear about even more films, go check out his video. I'll put the link down in the video description once it is live. That's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put a playlist up here of all of the full reviews that I'm going to do, and I'll continue adding to them as I make them for all the films I saw during this festival. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.